Hey, Brandon.
Happy Monday. It's that time of week again.
How are you?
Oh, catching up one sec. I feel a sneeze coming on, so if I have to mute, it might be that. Today was nice, so I snuck in a bike ride before jumping on the meeting here, and I think the allergies are kicking in right now. So I'm like back and forth between like runny eyes or runny nose, teary eyes, all that stuff.
I see. I see.
But yeah, on the East Coast, it's been nonstop rain, and so today was one of the first days it was dry out. I'm like, I gotta go,
Yeah,
gotta get
good
out the
call.
house.
Good call to be out. Especially in our profession, right? Sitting in front of desk all the time.
You can always go with the Vanessa option, get the treadmill.
Yeah, I thought about that, but I'm still maybe not convinced. Yeah, but I just probably should try and see myself.
My challenge is my feet went out on me. I don't know, about 5 years ago, and they're mostly back to good now. But plantar fasciitis, basically, the arches having trouble on them and whatnot. And so when you get pain walking, when you get pain standing, it's like that's no fun. You don't want that. So that was walking really did it to me. You had to get all the shoe inserts to help out and all that stuff. And so I that was the point that I said I need to take up cycling instead.
Ah, I see. I see. Interesting. Yeah, I have because of sitting. I have also some problems with my back, mostly like this hernia stuff on the spine. It's really hard to get rid of that. Uh, but once it gets you, there's a lot of problems.
Yep.
I'm not sure about the others because we have 5 minutes after 7. If we should postpone the meeting or let's give them 5 minutes more if they don't join. I think we should meet the next Monday in that case. Oh, there's Vanessa. So it looks like we are not going to postpone the meeting. Hey, Vanessa. I guess we can start in that case. So I put two items to agenda. First one is feedback from OCI maintainers, because with Brandon we were thinking how we could bring them into the loop. Brandon has some idea that we could basically record proposals and share with them, right? So I think we could do that for proposal A, proposal E, F, and H. Proposal B is kind of outdated, I would say, with the progress of the working group because it was very uh, there was so many things. It was very wide proposals. It because it talked about also about the implementation of the OCI tool that I think it's kind of invalid right now. So proposal A and E make sense in case of extending the image spec, and proposal F and H when it comes to artifact. So maybe we can just record those two proposals, sorry, those four proposals, and share them with the maintainers.
Yeah, and the thought was just to go back over them again in this meeting, and then when this reporting goes up, we'll just give them that link. maybe not this meeting, but next week or
Yeah.
something like that, whenever folks have a chance. And the reason for recording it here was that we were hoping we would have the representative for each one of the proposals available to talk about their own proposal.
The next meeting, Joe will join because he's traveling to Europe. So if possible, I would start with proposal H since he's he's not always attending the meetings. I would like to give him a chance to do this, and we can order record other proposals as well later. So let's do it that way. And in the meantime, I think it still makes sense that we continue with this final design or whatever we call it for potential solutions. So the second topic here is final design of compatibility artifact part 2. So I got some comments already about that. And there is a good question about the scope, what to do next with that. Because in this document, I would probably limit to the artifact manifest type, how it should generally look like, and the compatibility specification we want to come up. So some simple schema. I wouldn't add into this document proposal for labels because I see that the labels could be used as well for the first use case for the image selection if we decide to introduce platform compatibilities. So these labels would be used in two places. That's why I would like to keep a separate document for that. So in general, I imagine this like we have a final design for the artifact, final design for labels we want to use and process, how to enable them, and also final design how to improve image selection for container runtimes if we go with platform features, if we go with platform compatibilities or something else. So from my point of view, I would like to see 3 separate documents with this specific subjects.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think it's kind of funny. We've gone through like all these iterations for compatibility artifacts. And what we have here is like the simplest version of like the first one that was presented. I would say that I guess my one question that I have now that I didn't ask in my comments here is why is tag special? Why is tags a list and other things that are a list in the label? Like why is tags not just another label that we will put in our definition of labels that are allowed later? And if you need a list, then you separate them with commas. Because when you're actually serializing these labels or marshal, unmarshal, and go, for example, you're going to have to do something special for tags. And wouldn't it be easier if everything was just string?
Yeah. That's just my mistake. I mean, I didn't thought about that. I just thought, okay, tags list, and I just put uh, JSON list in here, right? That's the reason. I didn't have anything specific in my mind. But I'm glad that you started this topic because let's discuss maybe this kind of thing. If we want to keep uh, JSON array, or do we want to keep, as you say, just a string and separate elements by comma? Because you're right, from the implementation point of view, you don't have to check what is under the interface, which makes the implementation easier. But is it more readable that way than a specific than simple array? Because I'm thinking here uh, user experience over implementation. Because if, for example, we do some kind of checking what's under the interface, it's a bit more complex. I don't think from the performance point of view it's gonna be a big overhead because the JSON object is not that big. I'm just thinking right now, if from the user perspective, it's better to have something like that or something like maybe not here, right? That was Intel or no, not Intel. Let's put it that way. Or
Foo bar.
yes,
Those are exactly the tags that I go for too. I don't
I
know. I
mean,
guess I actually find the second one easier to read. I know it's strange because like intuitively you're like, oh yes, the list that is parsed is better. But now that I'm looking at it like that, I'm not actually convinced about that. And for me, it becomes more a question of like, what is the better delimiter for for an item based
mhm.
on readability? Because right now you have a comma and a space. and that's pretty readable. But which one are you splitting by? Are you
Yeah.
splitting by the comma and then removing the white space? Like maybe that should be, yeah, because that becomes less readable, right?
Yeah.
And that's less, yeah, I would say that the comma with the space is the most readable, just looking at these foobar examples.
Mhm. Because if I would be outside of that group and like I would see, okay, those guys are using array. They don't use JSON array. They are just coming with their own notation of list. And the first question to my mind is coming, why they are doing that way? Why, if implementation is really so hard that they cannot use just JSON notation in that case, that it's already established for arrays.
I just don't think we should have special cases,
Mhm.
like because if we're going to do tags for lists, then some other label is going to come up that could be a listy thing, and then well, why don't we do that one have a listy thing? I just think it's easier to be to choose a standard, to choose one thing, and then to parse it.
Yeah, so I'm talking also about the labels as well, not only about the tags. I'm talking because if we are choosing between having this notation for arrays or maybe this one over this for everything, not only for tags. So yeah, but
Yeah, I don't
it's
think it looks as good, but that's just my opinion. Adding in the bracket, like visually, but
okay. Any other opinions, Brandon? What do you think?
I don't have many opinions on this stuff.
Okay. I also don't have a strong opinion about that. I'm just trying to find the best option. So let's put it that way. I will wait for other opinions as well because so far only Vanessa commented on the document. Joe had a short. Uh,
I would say if you're putting things in there, you're going to want JSON syntax. So if you're going to have a list, it needs to be a JSON list.
Makes sense.
wait, is there a distinction between a JSON list and like so you're saying that the list that we're coming up with is not a JSON list, so it's like raw.
But it's definitely not a
I,
JSON syntax when it comes to list. If we are
yeah,
going, for example, this approach.
maybe I was misreading. I might have been misreading that a little bit too. I didn't realize that was all in quotes since that was a string of a list. The more you throw it into a parser that's after JSON, like we're just asking for more trouble because now people have to write a parser on top of a parser.
Has anyone looked into like if it actually has performance implications?
Uh,
Here's Stack Overflow to the rescue.
I was looking at that in the past. Basically, with this, what I wrote in the because I had some stupid
I found one.
parsing in here. I don't remember that was the convert. Yeah, because when it became if it's a map or if it's a list or something like that, it gets complicated, and then it is a problem, right? But if we limit only to arrays, I don't think it's gonna be a problem. But with even for these maps, if you have dynamically, if you create, for example, this is a dictionary, right? That you have a tag something like that, right? And you allow multiple possibilities for one key to have multiple types, then it's a problem. But if we only leave it to list or string, then it's not a big overhead, especially that those objects are not big. However, something to double check. But I don't think it's gonna be like heavy.
Yeah, the Stack Overflow. So they did something similar. And it says that, well, the last edit was 2019, which was a hot minute ago. Let's see, but they said that it was 5 to 6 times slower. Let's see. Yeah, I think this is something we could write a. So did you already benchmark it? Is what you're saying?
Yes, I was doing benchmarks, but on very small subset of data. I'm not
Yeah,
sure
we need to
how.
scale that out. We need to.
Yeah, I mean it was something like that because I don't expect compatibilities will have I don't know 1 MB size or so, unless I'm wrong. But
I feel like I don't know. I don't know. We can assume anything about how much stuff people are going to shove in there. Like
mhm,
if you're I guess coming from like a SPAC package, if you've ever looked at a SPAC spec, which has the others, it's a big thing. So yeah, I think we also have to consider that usually you're probably not going to be parsing just one of these. You're probably going to parse a bunch of them looking for like one field, and then you're going to compare that or a couple of fields, and then you're going to pair that small number of fields to figure out which artifact is the best.
So I would say let's double check that. Let's repeat the tests. I can do this and present results the next time. And because this operation is not it's not going on the first line, so it doesn't have to be very, very, very fast. I would say, at least I think, unless you are enabling
What
that
do you
in
mean
the
it's not
sketch.
going on the first line?
I'm talking about that if you include this in the scheduler, right? You pull the image. How to phrase that correctly? Sorry, I'm still sleeping. My point is, you are not having a live traffic on that. So, for example, you don't execute this operation every 5 seconds or so. It can be. It's not like kind of operation that is exhausting resources very much every time, every second or every 5 seconds. It's just being executed only when the image is pulled, which happens like rare, I would say.
Oh wait, no, you're gonna want to get the artifact before you pull the image.
Yeah.
The whole point of the artifact is so that you can figure out which image you want to pull, right?
But the image pull, even if you are, I just treat this operation as one because it's related to image pull, right? And image pull doesn't happen often because it's not like you're on the cluster, you're not pulling images every minute or so.
Well, the way that I think about it is that if I am implementing this for a scheduler to do, and my application is lamps, and I have 18 lamps variants to go through, that means 18 different artifacts. So my scheduler has to get them, which already is just so when you have like a scheduler, the response time that you want is like, I forget if it's like micro, it's very small. It's kind of like latencies in HPC that are extremely low as compared to like what is acceptable in cloud. And if you have to do that for each one, pulling it, and then you have to spend seconds, serializing these artifacts, it's already too slow. So I think yes, HPC cares about performance. It can become a real issue. Well, it can become a real issue with a scheduler, especially. We would have to do something where we like offload that decision to happen outside of the scheduling operation, like caching the decision. So that's not ideal either. That's a much messier thing.
Okay. So this is I misjudged that. I've in that case it's a real performance, a real thing in here.
Yeah, and I would say it's probably going to be an issue if you're even outside of HPC, because the order, even though Kubernetes just represents time in seconds, which is another thing that I won't even get into, it's still going to be an issue if it really kind of slows down, the selection of an image. So I guess what I think, what we probably can do is start with a very kind of vanilla format, like a structure like this, and say we haven't decided on the labels yet. And that includes both the labels, but also like what values they're allowed to have, like the format of the values. And I do think we need to come up with likely use cases. Go back to it. I mean, we probably already have them, but we actually need to do experiments that look at how much time it takes to kind of handle different formats of artifact, and then decide what's good enough, what's not good enough. It could be that they all suck, because and then there's like really it's trivial to make it like slightly suckier than case one or something like that. But if we come to an answer empirically, maybe that's a good way to go about it.
Yep. Sounds good to me. Okay. Okay. I'm not sure, Brandon, did you read the proposal of that? Do you have any comments to that?
Nothing from me on this one.
Okay. So you're not.
Yeah, Brandon's like grinning the whole time, making fun of our timestamps in HPC. He's like, this artifact idea just sucks, period. So I'm just not, I don't have opinions, man.
I'm here for comedic relief.
Okay, so on that matter, we are just looking for more reviews. So maybe Joe or others will take a look again what we find. I will
Yeah,
run
so
some.
did we decide we want to do, so Marcin, you're gonna do some basic benchmarking.
Yeah.
Do you want me to, what I can also do is try to just prototype something that, I don't know, that I would consider an HPC use case and see and do my own benchmarking, I guess.
Okay. Sounds good.
What I don't know how to benchmark is how do we measure like the actual time that it would take to pull from a I guess we could make the artifacts, put them in a registry, and then just include the pull, but that doesn't include the process of actually using them to select because that's like the whole algorithm thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's even fair or right to do.
I would say maybe not. We're just mostly interested about the pool and the actual time of parsing this stuff and see the actual result.
Okay.
But I'm not sure if I will be able to deliver this next Monday because Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm coming to HPC conference in Hamburg. So I will be back on Friday.
Oh, I think this week is ISC,
Yes.
and I'm pretty sure it's also, isn't it also in Hamburg?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So
Yeah.
there's like another HPC conference the week after in the same town,
I'm
or the
talking
same
about
city.
ISC exactly. That I'm traveling for ISC.
Oh,
But
it goes into next week.
no, this week. This week. I'm saying that I'm not be able to deliver these results on Monday.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry, my brain is waking up too.
that's fine. So okay. In that case, I guess we don't have much to talk about right now. I would postpone the discussion about labels once we have this merged. Okay, if it's fine by you.
And I missed it, but what are we doing for the maintainers to get feedback?
Record proposals. Like you basically we go to the meeting, we go again through proposal A, like authors going through the proposals and just saying what is this, why do we need that, and give some context to maintainers because last time people complain it's a little bit long. The proposals are long, and we try to like make it easier for them to review it. That we
So we're
put
going back to the previous artifact proposals and presenting those to them. Shouldn't
uh,
we come up with our one proposal and then present it to them like the simple thing, get their feedback, and then go back to tweak it? Like I don't what's the purpose of presenting the older proposals to them?
the I would say because they might say we don't like this already. That before we come up with all the final proposals, it might take us some time to get there to get everything merged, this final stuff, and they will say we don't like it anymore or something, or we didn't like it at all. So if we put them early, this before we come up with the final proposals that they like to, I think it's a good idea that they have a chance to read the older proposals and say already if they like something or not. It should happen much earlier than it's we are a little bit late with them, but I wouldn't like to delay this.
Are we just focusing on the proposals that do something to the manifest that they care about for their use case? Like, why would they care about artifacts?
Yeah, because some maintainers might not like the idea of the artifact that this is a new spec, new standard to maintain. And people are already asking. I think Derek asked, "Why do we need artifact?" He didn't expect this. So
Yeah. So my 2 cents, I think so the manifest proposals are what they care most about. And we just have a couple of those. They're fairly simple. I think we should present both of those. For the artifacts, I don't think we should give them all the proposals off the bat. I think we should present them with one basic idea, get their feedback. If they give feedback that like they don't like it or whatever, then we do a second stage of either presenting the original ones and being like, is there something here that you like better? Or we iterate on the artifact. I don't think we should go and present them like this huge list of proposals because that's too much. Like part of our job is simplifying that huge amount of information for them, if that makes sense.
Sounds reasonable to me.
And the other thing about the artifacts is like they're all, I look across our artifact proposals, and except for some early ones that you did that had the graph, which was pretty cool, but it was kind of complicated. They're like all kind of the same. They just have like subtle nuances and differences. Like this one has a priority or a score, and like it's a lot of noise when there doesn't need to be that noise, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. If we filter out this noise. So what do you think, Brandon? Maybe what Vanessa's suggesting is better in here, that basically we present the artifact idea once it's ready, once we come up with this final structure, that they don't go through this H and F and see the small differences. Basically,
I worry the risk if we try to focus this down to just a single proposal is that they'll just say, yeah, we don't like it. And they might give you some reasons here and there, but if they just kind of throw the whole thing out and say, yeah, you're off in your own world, we're not going to even consider implementing it, we might lose them. Versus if we give them a couple of options and say we're thinking these different things, they might give us more feedback of saying,
aren't that different. And if they say that they don't like it, we'll say, okay, let's show you these modified slight variants. Like it's not like we're going up to like the Council of Vampires, like in Twilight, and they're like, oh, we don't like it. Like we're gonna kill you now. Like with the girl that like stares with the eyes and
it's not they're gonna kill it, but they may never implement it, which is just as bad.
Yeah, but like we have to, it has to be an understanding that this is a discussion that we're presenting them a prototype, and it's not like approval or disapproval and you'll never talk to us again. It's like, okay, let us get your feedback. Let us show you some other ideas. Let us get your feedback and we'll come up with something different, or let us better try to convince you why this is needed. I don't know. I guess I'll just say I disagree with you.
I think there's a big difference between A and E versus some of the other ones that are saying, here's the external artifact. And so just between those two, I think
no, but those are different proposals. A didn't have an artifact, right?
Correct.
So I'm saying we present all of the proposals that aren't related to the artifact to them, because those are specifically what they care about more. For the artifact, all of the proposals that we have for the artifact are very similar. It's like compatibilities with stuff under it, and the only nuances are about the stuff. And so I think we should present all of the detailed proposals that have directly to do with the manifest, because those are the details that they are going to be interested in. But for the artifact, where we have a bunch of redundancy in a lot of different proposals, I think we should just present them with one to start. If they hate it and they don't like it, we get their feedback, and either in that meeting, if it's appropriate, we say like, okay, let's show you some other ideas, or actually we had another proposal that addresses your concern. Let me show you that. Or we kind of do a second round when we go back and talk to them again about the artifact. But I think the thing that they're going to care most about is the image selection case with that main manifest. And those are the ones we should focus on.
Yeah, I think the feedback we're going to end up getting is whether or not they want an artifact at all. And so I worry
so the details don't even matter.
Yeah, so I worry about spending too much time finalizing that before we put together some kind of presentation to say, hey, are we going
but
down the
I
right
think
path
it's
or not?
mostly finalized. It's like compatibilities and the stuff. Like I don't think there's much more work to do there, is what I'm saying. I don't think I'd be proposing this if we were far from that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Vanessa has a point about this artifact stuff, because each proposal for the artifact brings some different details, but the general idea is that we need to know from maintainers if they are okay with the artifact, with our justification for that. So we could show them proposal A, proposal E, and even this document that is like loose,
The one change I would make is take out final design. So
Okay.
they don't get worried about that. Just put like design of compatibility artifact.
Yeah. So that's something we could show them, and that makes sense to be. For sure, Derek would be much more happy not to read this all this artifact proposals. Just have a simplified version of that. So let's do it that way, okay? Then record proposal A, proposal E, and we are going to record the idea of the artifact based maybe on even this document.
And the thought process I had for doing the recording was just use one of these meetings.
Sounds good to me. So let's do it on the next meeting in that case.
I was about to say, you're saying Joe might be able to make that one.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, and we can. I'm actually looking for the benchmarking stuff. Sounds fun. I like benchmarking stuff.
Okay. Any more topics?
HPC people, I enjoy benchmarking things. Mind blown again.
Okay, so it's just to clarify, I don't like technically even consider myself an HPC person. I just happen to work at a national lab. Like my background is not people get into HPC like by accident and like and then they I don't know. Actually, I shouldn't say bad things about HPC, but like I was like an HPC user because I had no other choice. And like I really like the cloud. I use the cloud a lot more than I use HPC. So I span the space and but I am not an HPC person. Please
I'm
don't.
just here for the comedic relief. I'm not making career-ending accusations here.
Yeah, my career's over now. Oh,
Forever, you're stuck in HPC land.
yeah, feels that way sometimes.
I have one more topic to discuss. I would like to hear your opinions, personal opinions about kind of how do you feel about this solution. So I will just go first and tell you how I feel about this, where we are, and about progress and so on. Because from this, what we are talking here, and based on the all proposals we created, I think the best final solution for me would be if we combine this proposal A and proposal E, that we use platform features and platform compatibilities for the image spec, and we have this idea of the duplication platform compatibilities, that we don't repeat keys that are the same for images, and at the same time we include artifact idea, that you have a full compatibility that with some artifact that can point to images. So basically, having an artifact could work together with changes in the image spec, at least for me. And I wonder about your opinions about that. How do you think like this should look like, or do you get my point, or what I'm
What's the
asking for?
alternative though? Just like only choose one?
Yeah, only
Oh,
choose
I
one.
always assumed we were choosing two.
Because I understand from at least my personal impression from the meetings I had at OCI Weekly is that people are kind of surprised with this artifact, and looks like there is no understanding why do we need this artifact, and there is also some misunderstanding about at least when I heard some opinions from Mike about this DRA and his suggestions. I think there is not good understanding of what we are exactly doing in here. So I'm just wondering, like, how do you see this overall, like this proposals we are creating and the final solutions or so? Because I understand, Vanessa, you are okay with both. Like if we extend the image spec for image selection and artifacts, for example, for different use cases like Flags framework, scheduling, or cluster provisioning, and so on.
Yeah, so I guess the use case that I would describe it as is that putting very kind of basic stuff in the manifest is really mostly about image selection. The place where it is, you know, to be most quickly done We don't have to go through all of these like, lists of manifests or whatnot and API calls and refers or whatever. The case for the artifact could be compatibility too, but I think it's kind of what we talked about where you're transitioning a little bit from like, is it compatible? Is it going to work? That's the question that I care about. To like, actually, I want it to work really well. And I need to look at a lot more things to determine that it works really well. And that distinction, I think for a lot of use cases, just knowing something's compatible and it's going to work is good enough. And maybe there's a little bit of nuance where you can put like a tag or something in the manifest that will say like, this will work better because of this feature of the kernel or something. But for a lot of kind of the HPC use cases, a lot of what's going to go into that compatibility artifact is going to be specifics about not just like the system compatibility, but the application. So for example, this is the storage, this is the file, access pattern that this particular image has. And so it's going to do better. So if you have a graph and a scheduler, and the graph has kind of a main containment subsystem, which has nodes and cores and, kind of the physical stuff. And then you have another subsystem that talks about IO, you're going to want to pick the image with that. You're going to want to pick the nodes that have the right IO. So I don't know, shared memory, Rabbit, something, different kinds of storage that is best for that application. That is not something that is going to go in the image manifest. It's so nuanced. There's often a lot of data that you have to kind of put. So there's this whole bucket of use cases that aren't just about like, is it just going to work? Because I care more about whether it's going to work. I want that 1.9% improvement in performance because I've chosen the right IO pattern for the particular application.
Yeah, I understand. So I'm in sync with you. I mean, I would justify usage of this artifact versus only, for example, extending image manifest. Pretty much the same. With of course putting context on our own telco use cases. Like for example, if you want to provision a cluster, you want to pull some metadata, and you do not necessarily need to pull image index, which is I guess tied to container runtime spec. Like if you are not involving container runtimes, I think you should not pull image index in that case or whatever. So that
It's also about ownership. So for example, for SPAC, we have what's called the SPAC binary cache. It's not an OCI registry. It's like a structure in S3 basically, where you pull down essentially binaries and then all of their metadata. So we would have a compatibility artifact in that binary cache that's associated with a particular thing, and we'd be doing that same check. So I guess that's different than ownership, but the ownership case in the context of a registry is like, okay, I'm doing something, I'm using an image that I don't own, and so I can't put an artifact that's going to be found via the refers API. But maybe with my tool, my custom tool, I can give it a different, I can either give it a local path or a different registry URI to an artifact. Like something that I use a lot is Aura, so OCI registry as storage. I make a thing, I push it, I know exactly the URI of the thing, paired with some image, and then I do that. And so if the only availability of compatibility metadata is something that's in the image manifest and I don't own the image, that is a problem. I can't do anything. I have to come up with my own standard thing. And all of a sudden, then all of a sudden you're not working together as a community anymore.
Means you need to copy the image.
Yeah, which is huge. I mean, that's hugely redundant, and yeah, I would
make smaller
rather
images.
But
that's also not going to happen. Oh my God, I have a story from this weekend, but I'm not telling because it's just.
I've got fun side conversations too. I did want to say a concern that I have. I want to be careful. OCI is not previously dictated, particularly to schedulers. We have kind of said, here's how you define an image and run an image and deploy an image. We haven't said, here's how a scheduler is supposed to do their job. And so
Oh, you can't.
want to be, And so I want to be careful that we don't go off and say, let's work in OCI land, make our spec, and then walk over to the Kubernetes people and say, okay, we made the spec over here. You now need to start working with it. Because I don't know how well that's going to go over in Kubernetes land.
That's a good point. I mean, because Vanessa's use case with scheduler is very specific, right? It's just one use case of why do we want to have an artifact. There are plenty of other use cases, uh, but yeah, I get your point that not using this argument too often, maybe with maintainers, that they don't get appropriate or that they don't get the wrong impression about why artifact is here. Because if they hear we want to bring artifact because of scheduler only, they will say no, of course. This is
No,
what
I
I
think
think.
the general argument is that the artifact provides additional compatibility metadata about an image that is out of scope to put in the manifest,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
additional metadata about the application that goes beyond compatibility, that says like, I want it to be compatible and the best optimized for some use case, where the use case could be scheduling, but it totally could be like machine learning, AI, something. I mean, like the use case almost doesn't matter. It's more about empowering people that are building and using images to put that information somewhere and to get it. And I don't, to kind of respond to Brandon's comment, I don't think we're gonna, go to any community and be like, this is how you should do something. But we have to make sure that the simple structures that we design empower people to use them in ways that meet their use cases. Which is why in the beginning we went through this huge list of use cases. Like, what was the point of that if not to think about what we're designing in that context? We're not going to go across that down that huge list and then go tell people what to do. We're just making sure that what we do has them in mind.
Yeah.
so
The
sorry,
direction
go
I would
ahead.
look at though is that the huge value of all the artifacts and the subject and everything we've got in OCI is that anybody can make them. You don't have to be OCI to define an artifact. And so if this is something that we want to see used by a scheduler, we could start the scheduler today. We don't have to go through the OCI process. We can go directly to scheduler right now and say, what would it take to make this happen? And
And
start
that's what
working
I've
with
been
them.
doing with my scheduler. I
Yeah.
prototype. I mean, yeah, we could,
But
but it would be nice. It would be nice though to have a common structure of artifact for different schedulers that may use it differently. But if it has a common structure, maybe with some common labels, then you get some cohesion, you get some collaboration, as opposed to everyone having their own JSON dump in an artifact that's different, and then you're not working together again.
yeah, but I don't think we here in this one group are the ones that have the visibility into all those different separate scheduler implementations and their needs.
We
And
don't,
so,
but we have visibility into a lot of them, and we can bring that experience to this discussion.
So I would my comment from that is for that would be I would put maybe scheduling as one of use case that could be solved by artifact. But my main reasoning why we should put artifact into game is like it's more flexible. I mean, if you have Vanessa's use case that you want to bring your own compatibility, you don't have to republish the index and put your metadata in there. This is the first thing. And especially if you have two different compatibility artifacts that would point to the same image, right? It's possible. So you don't want to have two indexes just to have the same solution on the image index. And the second thing is the limited size of the image index. That's why we are working with this the duplication idea, that you don't want to keep platform compatibilities being duplicated for each image, right? So those two reasons, at least for me, are valid to have an artifact in that case. And also with extension of image spec, because those two solutions, in my opinion, could work together very well.
Plus one.
to kind of put it in context of other groups I've seen, image signing has been done by two, eventually going to be three, not counting some of the previous things. And so we've got multiple implementations of that today, and they didn't have to come to us. At a certain point, they realized they were all implementing the same thing and said, can we at least get some kind of commonality in how we package this so that other tooling knows how to work it, and that's how we got the whole refers stuff. But they were able to make their whole signing specs, and people have been able to make attestation specs and other stuff completely on top of OCI that didn't require anything from OCI for us to bless individual implementations. And then you could have multiple groups all attached into the same image if they needed to, and saying, look, we're going to sign multiple things. We're going to attach multiple compatibility specs for different schedulers on our image because we want to be able to run these multiple environments. And then it gets to a certain point that someone says, okay, now we got these three different things going on in parallel. Now let's kind of look at how we can consolidate them.
So with this signing, do they have the same artifact type? Because they are doing this. No,
Nope.
different, right? Okay.
Completely different artifact type. But originally they were not using refers, and notation went straight to refers. Cosign is moving to refers. And the advantage of that is that now one tool can copy the image and the signatures and everything registry to registry. So we're getting to a better scenario, but it also means that all this stuff can coexist. People can make their own implementations and attach it to an image, and may the best spec win in terms of end users picking and choosing which ones they want to use.
Yeah, I would argue that that's still kind of a competitive space in the sense that like there will be convergence on one or a few number of those implementations. Or what could also happen is like the reverse, where you have multiple implementations that people really like, and they're like, why are we doing this differently? Let's come together and make a standard, and then there will be 15 standards. So like yeah, I see your point, but I don't think it's necessarily going to stay like that forever.
Yeah, my comment to that would be, I get your point as well, Brandon. Why it's because this is a normal path, right? You first come with a few implementations, and people realize, okay, we are overlapping with these ideas, and we should maybe standardize that or unify it in some way. But we already realize that we have different organizations that requires one compatibility stuff and spec, and why not to skip this first process of implementing stuff, in our own garden, and just bring already unified kind of standardization for that. That would be my counter argument to maintainers if they ask about that.
Do we have people representing each of those different implementations today in this group, though?
I would say so. I mean, because at least we would have to come up with some kind of labels how we express this compatibility stuff. I mean, if I would implement today some compatibility tool, it would be good that different implementations follow the same specification or behavior. Like for example, if you have a list of compatibilities over artifact or so. So I don't think it's a bad idea to come up with standard for this spec, even if it's very simple.
Yeah, I see the variation being in like the implementation, like how they use it and algorithms and that kind of thing. But for a really simple like JSON structure of stuff, like I think it's pretty easy to say like we recommend that you do compatibilities and then this, and then minimally, even though the implementations are different, the algorithms are different, one community that makes a ton of those JSON dumps and pushes them in a registry can use it in their other implementation.
I mean, from our group here, who do we have representing the Kubernetes scheduler?
So I don't represent the Kubernetes scheduler, but I've developed several custom schedulers, and I'm also working on an in-tree scheduler. I read the scheduler code base at dinner. I know how a lot of it works, but I don't represent it.
Yeah, I'm leaning toward like, can we get a maintainer over here that would say I would merge this PR if it came our direction?
Probably SIG scheduling is where we want to go.
So what I think right now, I mean, because Flux framework is very specific to HPC, if I understand correctly, and there was this scheduler for HPC use cases, at least
It
from the
doesn't
reference.
have to be.
Doesn't have to be. Okay. But if we come to Kubernetes right now, SIG scheduling and would tell them that we have an artifact that could improve your scheduling decisions, I would say they wouldn't like that because they wouldn't like to pull some additional metadata at the scheduling time. It should be ahead and it's going on today like that because you have pod spec, you bring node selectors, and you make decisions where you want to have that at this
So
stage.
my prediction of where that would go. So there's a tool called Q that takes different abstractions of job. And the way that it works is it sets suspend equals true on the job. So when you submit the job, whatever kind of job it is, there's many different kind of abstractions that use job. It does not go to the scheduler. And so this is like, it's Q is a controller. Actually, it's a bunch of controllers that sits as on that level. And then what it basically does is it takes into account so what you do is you create cluster queues and resource flavors, and you say like, this is this is how many jobs for this particular, set of attributes, pod, CPU, whatever, can go to this cluster. Here's how I want to prioritize things. You could throw in there like, here's the compatibility that I want. Q handles that on that level, and it only unsuspends the job. So it goes to the scheduler after it's decided where it's going. So I don't think we would have compatibility metadata on the level of like actually putting it even in a scheduler plugin or the in-tree scheduler. I think it probably would go in a tool like Q that's like this middleman controller or controllers.
Yeah, so I basically imagine this in a very similar way because if we provide this compatibility metadata, there have to be some tool in between that will generate the pod spec out of that, and it will already generate the node selector where the pods should be addressed and so on. But I started attending the DRA meetings of Kubernetes, and it will be very hard right now to translate, in my opinion, compatibility metadata with DRA because there is a kind of big difference between DRA and this what we are doing right now. We bring some kind of compatibility metadata, right? This is a requirement for the container, and DRA is not only expressing over DRA API. You don't only expressing the requirement for specific accelerator, you also express how do you attach them into pod and so on over the drivers. So I don't think we want to be so specific in here. Like for example, I to for example, yeah, if I have a container that requires GPU, I don't need to say I require virtual GPU or physical GPU. I just need GPU, and this kind of granularity comes with DRA. So it's not gonna be very easy to translate this kind of stuff, at least with DRA. This is what I think today. It's a different problem we are trying to solve in here. That's why I think we don't overlap, at least from this point of view. For me, it's like we are trying to standardize documentation. We try to bring one way how people define compatibility, and whatever you do with that, with some possibility of automation, because nobody wants to parse tons of different documentations and come up with some, instruction space on what somebody put in there. So we just try to come up with metadata that are quite standardized and can be used by some scripts to automate some stuff to some extent. But we are not going to DRA way that you bring all of these details, how to bring stuff into pods and so on. We could help with DRA stuff. I mean, at some point maybe, because the API, they are still discussing how the API should look like. And I'm planning to talk to John, who is the leader of this working group, about our compatibility stuff. But from the look I had with them, it's just it would be very hard because their API is kind of how to say that they don't have strong device typing, for instance. They are relying everything. They rely everything on the drivers. So you have to figure out what this driver is doing. Is it for GPU? Is it for something else? There is no good categorization from this what I saw. So it's not so easy to map compatibility metadata we try to come up to DRA and so on. So this kind of problems, and that's why I think we don't overlap. We just provide some metadata that could help, but not necessarily they will help with DRA case. But yeah, let's stay in contact with them as well and others folks like NFD and see if we are overlapping somewhere. But yeah, this is how it looks like from my perspective so far.
Yeah. Less concerned with overlapping and more concerned with if there's an end problem that we're both solving, that we don't solve it differently and then we're making a competing solution. If the underlying question is we want to deploy this to a machine that has a GPU, and NFD and some of these other things are all trying to do similar functionality, and Kubernetes is going to pick the one that's been working with them for all this time. I'd hate for us to put a whole bunch of effort into it and then find out at the end that, yeah, nobody cares about what the OCI made because they already had a solution.
So yeah, I think you're making an assumption there of permanence. And the number one thing about Kubernetes is that it is so expansive in terms of the number of working groups, projects. Like I was joking with, or one of my colleagues said something to the effect of like in Kubernetes land, like 1 year is like 20 years of development. And what happens is, many projects are created, and then maybe 1 year, this is the way that you do things. And the next year, that project is totally deprecated and there's another way to do things. So OCI makes things that try to be more permanent, but we shouldn't, it's a hard comparison to say like, let's not work on something because we're worried about stepping on the toes of one of these projects that actually probably isn't even going to be permanent. So what happens what I hope happens in the Kubernetes ecosystem is you have this explosion, and then at some point there's consolidation. But I think we have to just be very mindful of our specific scope use case and the applications for it, and then work toward that and not be like, oh, we got to stop working on this because actually DRA has this little thing. Probably what DRA is going to figure out is that there's a fundamental issue with, for example, getting information from the drivers. And so then they're going to go work on that. It's going to be, I don't know if this is making sense what I'm saying, but yeah, I guess I agree with Marcin that there's separation, and we don't totally understand how what we're doing is going to fit into all of these particular working groups in Kubernetes because there's so freaking many of them and they're going to change. But we can just be confident about what we're working on and the use cases. And if it helps one of these working groups, that's great. If it doesn't, though, then that's okay too.
So yeah. So just to add one more comment about that, because from my point of view, what would change if we come up with this compatibility metadata? So let's see, because if you want to deploy a container with GPU today on Kubernetes, and let's put it that way, you have an image, you don't know what this image requires, right? So you go to documentation, you see in the documentation this image requires GPU. So you go to the Kubernetes, you create a pod spec, maybe DRA API, and
well, you would do right. The most common thing I think you do is you would do a resource. So resources has requests and limits. Yeah. So if you wanted, for example, 4 GPUs, you'd say, and you put that little under request, you would put that as like NVIDIA, whatever 4. And then that would probably be parsed. And then so right now, I mean, I'm running experiments like this right now. Right now I have like a tag that's like lamps dash GPU, and that's the GPU one. And then I add that with it. So in the future, it could be more intelligent because I will have a GPU variant that via the compatibility metadata. So whatever is ingesting the spec for, in this case, it was a mini cluster, but ultimately goes to a pod spec. Whatever is ingesting that will be like, they have a resource request for 4 GPUs. Let me find you the right image that has the GPU. I'll still allow a CPU, but only if there's nothing else available. So I think that's how those two things come together.
So basically it would change from my perspective that people, instead of going to documentation to check what containers requires, they would to take a look into compatibility metadata that people define with image. So this is the biggest difference, and it would also allow you to make it a programmatic to some extent, that you can automate
Yeah,
some
that's
aspects
actually
of
a really
OS.
good point. So like it could be, it ideally would be programmatic, and assuming that you have all these different variants of your containers. But imagine a use case where actually this doesn't go into programmatic at all, into Kubernetes. Imagine a use case where you just have a container URI, and then the compatibility, artifacts are parsed and put in an interface in a table for a person like me to look at, be like, oh, here's the GPU, tag that I want, or whatever. Here's the one that I want. I'm gonna, put that in my pod spec. So like that's another use case. It's kind of what you said before. We are coming up with like structured documentation that will be generated in an automated fashion, probably when you're building the application, and then packaged up for later, because that's important.
Yeah, and then you can write a software that understand that, translate to other specification. So we are not entering Kubernetes field, I would say. We are not trying to create API for schedulers or whatsoever. We just bring this small piece of metadata that can be used in Kubernetes but doesn't have to be.
Well stated.
Anyway, it's 8:05, so I guess we are done for today. Thank you, and talk to you next Monday.
Yeah,
Everybody
have
can
fun
show up
in
to the next
Germany.
meeting. Everybody can be 5 minutes late to the next meeting. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Bye.
Cheers.
bye. Cheers.